I believe it is important for students to understand what is available and how they need to apply for different bursaries. Also, students need to understand that no universities provide sufficient funding to cover for the full cost of their postgraduate studies. Students need to plan well in advance and to determine the full cost of their studies, that being registration, tuition fees, accommodation, and also the research cost, living expenses, and also to take into account some of the costs that the university might not cover, that they will have to cover themselves. When they apply for funding, they must apply once the call is open. They must not wait for the closing date, because when they wait for the closing date, most of the other students, they also apply at their time, and the system gets congested with system jams, technical problems. So I will always advise students to plan ahead. When you apply for funding, you need to communicate with the supervisor. Have meetings with the supervisor prior to the application. Discuss what options do we have, so that when you submit their names with your application and an email goes to them to request the recommendation for your project, they know of you and they are expecting your application. What is it that is going to distinguish you from other students is the quality of your application. You must remember that the only thing that the panel will be sitting with will be your application. That means your problem statement, it must be clear. Your objectives must be aligned to the call. Most of the applications for master's and doctoral studies, they are an online application. Students need to familiarize themselves with an online application. They also need to read the funding framework. When the call opens, apply on time.
My first piece of advice will be to design a template with all the sections that are usually asked in research proposals. Then when a call opens, you can just tweak these applications and all these information to make it fit to this specific application. Secondly, make sure that you read the funding guide even before you start with the application, especially in terms of the eligibility criteria. The nationality and your qualification is very important. Familiarize yourself with the internal closing date of your institution as well as the final submission date of the call.
So also read, and each and every step that you go through in your application, read and understand. If you do not understand, you save your document, you go back, you call a contact person with the call. They need to make sure that the research objectives are clear, the methodology is outlined in a manner that it is clear, and there is sufficient details that is outlined in the application, and also that the scientific merit of the study, and also that the potential impact of the research is stated clearly. Check which parts are important with the scorecard.
Never underestimate your budget. Make sure that every line item which appears in your budget also appears in your research proposal. For example, if you apply for conference funding abroad, then make sure that you also mention it, that you will disseminate your research information there.
Students and researchers need to understand that once they submit an application, feedback will not be available immediately, and comply with all the terms and conditions. Many of the universities have information session for when the calls are open for different funders. I always advise students to attend those information sessions, because sometimes you might be thinking that you know what is going to be required, but as I've mentioned, we invite the funders themselves. So to hear from the funders what is it that they're looking for, it is very important. So attending this session, I think it is very important for students.